Would you climb Mount Everest on the condition that you would never be able to tell anyone if you successfully summited? Welcome to Tales Under the Cat Tree. I'm your host, Dups, and these are tales by humans for humans. After all, words and stories are what give meaning to the worlds we live in. You sure you know where you're going? The cable car operator is looking me over from head to toe, from climbing helmet to boots. My shiny, scratchless ice axe grew heavier the longer he stared. I nod, once to acknowledge his question, twice with a pursed smile to brush away both skeptics, including my own. Yep, over Indian Ridge. I've got my copy of Scrambles. I patted my jacket pocket. Kane's Scrambles in the Canadian Rockies is the go-to Bible for all of us climber types. All right, well, remember the lift shuts down at sundown. You don't want to spend the night up here. I nod again, straighten my back, tap my hiking sticks, and step out of the cable car hut. The wind gust flares my jacket, an icy May wind straight from the north, wiping out the hint of spring that lies at the bottom of the mountain. Here at 8,000 feet, though, that wind traps dirty patches of snow clinging to wherever the sun's face had dared not stare too long. The scree-swept path leads upwards and away from the cable car station into the dreary, cloudy day. With a determined step and nary a look backwards, I head upwards on the bare, treeless, and windswept mountaintop. To the right of the ridge, as the mountain falls away, lie the Lego bricks of Jaspertown. On the left, over the ridge, rise misted peaks of all shapes. As my boots zigzag up the scree slope, I can even smell the tangy earth crispness of the mountain air. The wind gathers behind me and swirls in front of me. Ice pellets sting my face now and then, a sharp wetness that makes me squint. I gather my breath and glance behind to a cable car station that has also become a red Lego brick. The meandering white and grey path continues ahead, a summit at the end. My first solo summit. I bow my head, ignore the mist that swirls ahead and behind. I concentrate on each step. What did my Tanzanian friend once say as we marched up Kilimanjaro? Pole pole. Slowly, slowly. A single step. A breath in. A single step. A breath out. And then I slip, my foot to the side of an iced rock face, my gloved hand gripping a tensed stick. I draw a sharp breath and come out of my reverie. The peaks to the left are now walled in grey, gone. Below me, Jaspertown is ghosted. Ahead, a solo summit now barely within reach in a gathering sudden storm. The small red dot of the cable car station is wavering in the mist. I wipe ice pellets from my lashes. This was the point. A singular decision. I grip my pole, square my shoulders, shift my boots on the slippy scree, and took a step. That was a short autobiographical note that I called Indian Ridge. The truth of that day was that I turned around. Indian Ridge near Jasper in Alberta was not to be my first solo scramble in the Canadian Rockies. The weather turned, and so did I. The last thing I wanted to be was to be a statistic under the column that was titled The Climbers Who Should Have Known Better. I don't know when I became fascinated by mountains. Did I see one in Sri Lanka as a kid? I know my father did show me pictures of Kilimanjaro. When I was 15, I was lucky enough to go with my school to climb Mount Kinabalu on the island of Borneo. This was once-in-a-lifetime biology field trip while living in Hong Kong. Standing at the summit as the sun came up, I had done something that I did not think I had in me. I was never the sporty kid after all. This was, for me, quite the achievement. In the subsequent decades, I managed to summit numerous mountains, including returning back to Mount Kinabalu. Some were harder than others, some more famous than others, But each summit was a journey, and each taught me as much about myself as the mountain I was climbing. Two friends who have trekked with me in weird and wonderful places have been Mannion and Keli Ryan. They both came with me to Kilimanjaro, and later, Keli came with me up Mount Everest in Russia. Now, I want to have more detailed episodes about mountains and mountaineering and about specific mountains. But here's some excerpts from each of my interviews with Keli and Mike on this, a more general episode about the hazards of modern mountain trekking.
Hi, I'm Mike Mannion. I've known Dups since undergrad at Memorial. So that's over 30 years ago now. And yeah, we've gone on a bunch of climbing and trekking trips together in Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, Kinabalu in Borneo, a couple of climbs in the Rockies.
Why did you start doing this kind of stuff, trekking and mountaineering and climbing?
What mountaineering is for me, it's a combination of three things that I used to do that I did and that I enjoyed. So one being hiking in Newfoundland. I think when I was about 10, I climbed Gros Morne with my parents and a bunch of other people. And I still remember that, feeling that achievement of going up that gully up to the top of the hill. So yeah, so there's hiking. Now then, in university in the mid-90s, I got dragged to the climbing gym, Walnuts, for, just indoor wall climbing. So I learned a bit about harness and ropes and, climbing on vertical surfaces. Once I kind of had my first grown-up job and was making some money, I wanted to travel and go to different places around the world that seemed interesting. So mountaineering is kind of a combination of those three things.
What about the history of climbing, the things that you've actually looked at? I remember you were reading Snows of Kilimanjaro when we were actually going to Kilimanjaro.
And Ernest Hemingway said that, what was it, there were only three sports in the world: bullfighting, race car driving, and mountaineering. Everything else is a game. I think the idea being that those three activities are things you could really get killed doing. I don't know. I guess in Hemingway's mind that that made them real activities and not just games. As to the history of mountaineering, I'm not an expert about this at all, but in the ancient world or the early modern world, mountains were just obstacles and dangerous things that people tended to stay away from. And at some point, I think it's with the Romantic period, of literature and art, people started going to mountains and painting them and starting to climb up them. That's kind of when human beings started exploring mountains as an activity.
If I even look at the country of Sri Lanka, one of the most amazing things about the country of Sri Lanka is that the flatlands of Sri Lanka, which is, it's an island, much of it is populated and has been populated for 3,000 millennia. In the center of the island is these highlands, and these highlands go up to about 2,000 meters. Until the British showed up in the 19th century, there was no settlements up there. There was no reason to be up there. It was just an obstacle that they went around. Now, it didn't mean that they didn't go there, but it wasn't something that was important to them, I guess. I find it quite fascinating that it is actually a much more recent thing that we celebrate the idea of getting to the top of a mountain. In fact, in many cases, mountains were considered to be religious, and you wouldn't want to get to the top of the mountain because that would be somehow an affront to the gods or to the spirits or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's where the gods lived. Gods always lived on top of mountains, didn't they?
In many cultures, for sure. To this day, I think climbing Ayers Rock, for example, is not considered a good thing to do for the Aboriginal peoples. There are mountains in India, in the Himalayas, which would be considered to be sacred.
Yeah, there are mountains that even modern mountaineers, they kind of stop about 5 meters from the top because that's sort of the agreement that they can climb that high. But I think they're not allowed to go to the very top because that would be deemed disrespectful.
You and I both discussed very early on that neither of us were interested at all in going up Everest. And people have asked me many times since then, is like, oh, you've done these mountains. You're obviously one of those executives who's going to pay someone a lot of money and go up Everest. And neither of us want to. Why?
Okay, I mean Everest in particular. I mean anybody who knows anything about mountaineering or who even just watches the news, you've probably seen the huge queues of people lining up, scrambling up ice ridges at 8,000 meters, which is extremely dangerous. I am not good enough a mountaineer, or certainly was never good enough a mountaineer, that I could do that myself without a lot of aid. Now, could I pay $100,000 to hire a guide and a bunch of Sherpas to hold my hand and get me up to the top? I suppose I could. But when you're doing that, you're putting people at risk. You're putting the Sherpas, the guides, at risk. One thing I learned on one of my climbs when I was in Ecuador, one of my guides, I mean, his brother or somebody he knew, I can't remember, but I mean, somebody who was pretty close to him, had actually died in an accident where essentially his client fell and then pulled him to his death. So, you're putting other people at risk. And doing something like Everest, you're really putting other people at risk if you don't know what you're doing and can't safely get yourself out of any situation that you find yourself in. I was never interested in that.
I have to agree with you. Mountaineering for me has always been about getting to the top of something really wonderful, something interesting, usually with friends. I learned very quickly that doing it by myself was actually not that much fun. There was nobody to share the summit with. Everest is the kind of mountain where you really do have to know what you're doing. And it isn't a game to go to the top. I think for a lot of people it is. Pay money and get to the top of the highest mountain in the world. It's not about getting to the highest mountain in the world. And in fact, you and I have climbed in the Rockies. And I would say that one of the more tougher climbs I've ever done was actually something that was only about 2,800 meters. It wasn't very high, but it was just as tough or tougher because it was technical. You had a little bit more things to do, if you recall.
I mean, a question you talked about, whatever, a rich CEO who pays somebody to bring them up Everest. If the rule was somebody could climb Mount Everest, but they can't tell anybody about it, would they still do it?
That's a really good question.
Some might because it's something internal, but I suspect a lot wouldn't.
Now, on the many climbs that you and I have been together or mountaineering excursions that you and I have done, including training, what are the top 3 things?
The Kilimanjaro trip, which was a great kind of group endeavor. I think at the time you described it as kind of like going on a school trip almost, even though we were much older than kids in school, but it did feel that way. And yeah, all of us got to the top and it was really great. My most memorable trip would be the trip to Ecuador where I climbed Cotopaxi. I got attacked by a bull. Had my moment of fame in the Ecuadorian mountaineering community because I got attacked by a bull on the climb. I was fine.
Mike, thank you very much for coming on the show. I hope to have you on when I do a full episode on Kilimanjaro and all the different things we saw.
So hi, I'm Kelly. I'm from Fairland, Newfoundland, and I've known Dups for a long time.
So I have Kelly with me today because we went up at least 2 mountains that I can think of. One called Kilimanjaro and one called Elbrus, 2 of the world's tallest mountains. Yes. And Kelly is the only one of my friends who was there for both mountains. So I thought it would be fun to talk about our experiences and certainly Kelly's memories of the experiences. We climbed Kilimanjaro with a bunch of friends. Yeah. What do you remember about that trip?
I remember certainly being, in relation to the altitude, I was like, I'm quite fit. Altitude's not going to affect me. And being up at 3,000 plus 4,000 meters, wanting to run to the toilet, which was like 200 meters away, and really realizing within seconds I'm out of breath. I was freaked out by that. I've since been in altitude quite a lot, but I remember that was the first thing that hit me. I was like, whoa, this is really difficult. I didn't expect it to be. So yeah, that was kind of cool. What else? Well, I remember that sort of one after one, we all had a day or so where we were all kind of sick. And I remember notably when Dups was sick, there was this one place, I'm laughing, it probably wasn't funny, but it was funny for us that weren't experiencing it. We were climbing and Dups was just feeling really bad. And we all kind of noticed that, oh, there are these vultures that are circling. And there was like 4 of them, I'm sure. And we all kind of kept an eye on Dups and made sure they didn't swoop in. But yeah, it was like one of these things you see out of the cartoon, but it actually happened. We saw the vultures flying in, waiting to swoop in.
I do have a photo of me quite sick or feeling quite sick on a rock, and there is a bird watching me. I don't know if it's a vulture or not, but
And I remember the toilet. That was the barafoo. I actually can still visualize it, unfortunately, but that has become my standard. So there were these like sort of almost like a porta potty, but wooden, like a wooden outhouse with a hole. But this one was just piled. You couldn't imagine. There was no hole. It was just heaps and heaps. Oh God, I won't describe it any further. But from that day, that's been, when anyone asks me, oh, how bad was the public toilet? I was like, that was a 2 on the Barafoo scale. And there's not many people that get that reference. But
I do remember even composing a ode to Barafoo. So if we weren't sick by the time we got to Barafoo, we were definitely sick after Barafoo.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And what was it like right at the top?
Oh, it was amazing. Breathtaking. Well, literally breathtaking because you're in the altitude, but I remember the glaciers. And I remember what stuck with me is the guide had said that in 30 years there would be no more glacier. And I wonder what it looks like now.
So contrast that with us climbing Elbrus some 3 years later.
Whoa, totally different. I mean, Kilimanjaro, at least you start out and it's like stiflingly hot. And I remember Kilimanjaro, each day you just add more and more layers. You never take anything off. But Elbrus was just, it's cold right from the start.
So describe Elbrus, because I think Kilimanjaro is one which everyone sees pictures of and knows someone who's done it, or you can easily look things up. But Elbrus is a different mountain.
It's very snow and ice. It is a climbing peak, but we were roped together and we had like pickaxes just in case you were to fall and slide away, or if there could be danger of crevices. So I remember that we had to learn how to use them at first. I do remember at one point I think I took off my gloves and just my hands froze, and I was just really, really, really cold. I was probably hysterically cold, and the guide saying you need to go back down, and I was like, what? No, what? No. And that kind of snapped me out of it. And all of a sudden I was miraculously okay. And I remember Sergey telling me, just count to 8. Walk 8 steps, stop, take 2 or 3 breaths. 8 steps, stop, take 2 or 3 breaths. 8, count to 8. And that got me up the entire mountain. And I remember on that particular climb, I was like counting to 8. Okay, I'm going to count in English. Now I'm going to count in French. Now I'm going to count in Spanish. And I just kept mixing it up, but I just kept counting to 8. And I don't know, that technique is stuck with me for the rest of my life in all sorts of occasions.
Yeah, I remember you freaking out. So that was
Yes.
on the final day. And what I found amazing about both the 2 different ones that we were on together is I had pretty much no effect of the altitude. I mean, outside of being tired and exhausted and having been sick, not so great in Kilimanjaro. But in Elbrus, on the other hand, when you freaked out, I was still okay.
Yes.
And then you suddenly snapped out. I remember going, what the hell? And suddenly Kelly was sprinting basically to the summit. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, that was fast. And then I started going, and I think I was the last to arrive.
Yeah, you might have been.
And I was literally on hands and knees. I am going to get there, but it was, I could barely lift my head. I was so exhausted.
The altitude it's amazing how it affects at different times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anything you learned from climbing either of these 2 mountains?
Oh, endurance and resistance. Absolutely. I learned to pace myself, and I learned to, I guess, get control of myself in difficult situations, which is something that's been useful to me for the rest of my life. So, yeah, I'll take that away as a lesson.
Thanks to Mike Mannion and Keli Ryan for coming on the show. I will be doing specific episodes about Kilimanjaro and Elbrus, so I am sure you will hear more from them both. There's so much we didn't get to here. Thank you for listening to another episode of Tales Under the Cat Tree. Listen to the archives wherever you get your podcasts or at tales.dups.ca. That's TALES.dups.ca. This podcast is about the worlds we create, the realities we conjure, and the wonders of the human condition. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please help me reach more people by subscribing or sharing this episode. This podcast, including its intro music, is produced, edited, and created by Dileepa Vijayawardena. Give your pets a cuddle until we meet again for some tales under the cat tree.
What?
Yeah.
I don't remember this at
Do you
all.
not remember that?
No.
I remember you coming in and telling me I had to tell him, and you don't want to know where she had those dollars, basically.